They say the people who clean up after the power players see more than anyone else in the building, but no one ever expects a woman with a spray bottle to notice the difference between $1 billion deal and $100 million scam. That's the funny thing about being invisible. You end up in all the right rooms at all the wrong times. And sometimes, if you're unlucky enough, you're the only one who can see what's really about to happen. You know what I mean? So, I wasn't surprised when the whole mess landed right in my lap, even though I was just supposed to be polishing boardroom tables, not saving Titan Tech from corporate ruin. The morning light hit the glass tower of Titan Tech so hard it nearly blinded me as I walked into the top floor head down, gray uniform on, doing my best impression of background furniture. You learn quick in these places. Don't make eye contact, don't speak unless spoken to, become useful but forgettable. Richard Carlton, the CEO, was already pacing the suite like a wolf in a designer suit. He barely looked at me except to throw a folder onto his desk and grumble about streaks on the windows. The kind of guy who's so used to being served he probably thinks gravity's just another employee. Halvik says people will be here in an hour. Everything needs to be perfect, he snapped. Right? Everything but the truth, I thought but didn't say. As I knelt to gather up the scattered pages, something familiar caught my eye. Legal phrasing that felt too slick, too intentional. 5 years ago, I'd have flagged that in a heartbeat back when I was a legal assistant at Marshall & Brooks, with my future all mapped out, before I blew the whistle on the wrong partner and wound up blacklisted so hard even the janitors in the financial district knew not to trust me. Thomas Marshall used to tell me I noticed what others missed. Maybe that's a gift, maybe a curse. Either way, it's the reason I kept staring at the document numbers, one ending in the rest in B. Most people would have chalked it up to a typo. Most people haven't watched their whole life turn on a missing clause. The day blurred into a parade of expensive shoes and colder smiles. Halvik's negotiator, Grant Holloway, arrived with his team, all confidence and predator's charm. I kept moving, just dusting where dust didn't exist, watching Grant out of the corner of my eye. The man smiled like a magician, but his eyes never smiled with him. Merger of the decade, Richard bragged, right on cue. You'd have thought they were giving away keys to the city, not plotting a corporate takeover behind legal language so dense you'd need a submarine to reach the bottom. For the next hour, I faded in and out, pretending not to listen as they talked about integration timelines and champagne celebrations. Nobody noticed the Maid hovering over the contract pages except when I quietly mentioned a formatting issue on page 12. Your Maid, Richard snorted. Don't play lawyer. Grant smirked. That's the thing about power when it doesn't see you, you can see everything. And I saw fear, just for a flicker, in the way Grant's smile slipped when I mentioned the inconsistency. Later, they'd laugh about it over bottled water, but I'd already started to count the ways the math didn't add up. That evening, Julian Parker, a only security guy who treated me like a human, caught me by the loading dock. Halvik's had people in the building all night, he said. Legal department, floor 23. Smells fishy. He was right. That's where they keep the records and the big shredders. I waited until the place was empty, then slipped into the document room. Sure enough, 2 versions of the same contract. One with a crucial intellectual property clause, one without. I took photos, ripped a chunk of the altered page for proof, and ducked out just as Emily the assistant caught me snooping. Just emptying trash, I said, and she bought it, but my heart was pounding so hard I thought it had set off the motion sensors. The next night, the celebration dinner for the execs. I was pouring champagne and eavesdropping by the doorway when I heard Grant laughing about how the beauty of legal language is you can bury a bomb and no one reads the fine print. When his lackey asked if Carlton suspected anything, Grant said, "The man's ego is our best ally." That's when I knew for sure if this went through, Titan Tech would be stripped for parts, and no one would know until the ink was dry. But what can Maid do? Well, I'd always believed in 2 things. That small people see the cracks first, and that sometimes you need a little help. Julian found an old Halvik's laptop in the basement digital skeleton key. I cracked the password with a phrase Grant had dropped, Project Takeover. Inside, dozens of emails about swapping out contract versions at the last minute, detailed plans to acquire Titan tech patents while dodging the debt. Smoking gun stuff. But if I took this to Richard, he'd laugh me out of the building. MS. Townsend, the COO, was the only exec who'd ever bothered to learn my name. So I waited for her coffee break and laid it out. Discrepancies, proof, the works. She didn't buy it at first, can you blame her? But I followed up with an anonymous email and screenshots. It was enough to get her attention, if not her full trust. That night, my sister Maya called, frantic. "Stay out of it, Eva. Don't do this again," she begged. "The last time I tried to expose fraud, I'd lost everything. But you can't just watch the same crime play out twice and do nothing. You know? Even when Grant cornered me in the executive washroom and threatened me with a smile, I kept pushing. Later, I found a note in my locker, back off or disappear again. It rattled me, but it also told me I was getting close. With the signing ceremony hours away, Julian snuck me into the legal archives at midnight. We found the original and altered contracts, digital copies, handwritten notes about phasing out the Titan Tech brand. This wasn't a merger. It was a coup. I emailed everything to a lawyer I trusted, then spent a sleepless night preparing to blow it all up. By dawn, Grant's team had planted fake evidence in my cleaning cart, trying to frame me for stealing IP. Security called me in, and for a second, I thought it was over until Julian burst in with security footage showing the setup. MS. Townsend had begun a secret audit. The tide was turning, but it was now or never. The signing ceremony. Cameras flashing, champagne chilling, executives grinning like it was prom night. I hovered at the edge of the boardroom, Julian by the door, Townsend poised for a cue. As Richard raised his pen to sign, I stepped up, handed him the real contract, and whispered, "That's the wrong contract, sir." The room froze. Richard went red, then white, as MS. Townsend backed me up, revealing the changes to the board. Grant tried to shout us down, but it was too late. Legal plug in the flash drive, emails and all, projecting proof on the wall for everyone to see. Everything exploded after that. Grant and his cronies were detained, the press kicked out, the deal halted. Security escorted me to a side room, where I sat, numb, while the board grilled me on every step. I told them the truth, leaving out only what might hurt my allies. I was still a maid to them, but now I was the maid who saved the company. In the days that followed, the story spread. Maid turned whistleblower, the woman who caught what Harvard grads missed. Titan Tech stock rebounded, the board forced Richard to resign, and Halvik's CEO was arrested. Some called it justice, others called it luck. I called it doing what needed to be done, even when it nearly broke me. I got job offers, press requests, apologies from the same partners who once destroyed my career. I moved to a slightly bigger apartment, got promoted to VP of compliance. But the victory wasn't sweet, it was necessary. Every time someone called it a rags to riches story, I'd shake my head. I wasn't rich. I was just seen. And sometimes that's all it takes. A year later, I stood at the company gala, giving the keynote to the very people who used to ignore me. I talked about listening to small voices, about the power of noticing what others miss. The boardroom that once swallowed my warnings now echoed with applause. A young intern came up after and said, "You made me believe I belong here." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it too. But here's the twist, and maybe the part no one wants to hear. The system doesn't change because of one person. It changes because enough people decide to stop whispering and start speaking out, even if their voice shakes. The truth doesn't always get you a promotion or an apology. Sometimes it just gets you through the night with your head held high. So what would you do if you saw a billion-dollar lie hiding in plain sight? Would you risk everything, or would you keep your head down and hope someone else steps up? That's what I want to know. Drop your thoughts below. Who deserves to speak and who should listen? Because in the end, the real power isn't in the boardroom or the corner office or even the CEO's pen. It's in the quiet courage to say, "That's the wrong contract, sir." And sometimes that's enough to change everything.